800 hours, airspace north of the Senkaku Islands. The stratosphere is a frozen, silent void of deep blue. Sunlight glares off the white tops of a dense cumulus cloud deck 20,000 feet below. The air is thin and lethal. Far below, the ocean is a slate-gray sheet, broken only by the whitecaps of a turbulent sea. There is no sound here but the wind, a constant rushing presence that wraps around the world. It is a vacuum of peace, undisturbed by the friction of politics or borders. A shadow falls across the cloud deck. The silence shatters. 4 massive heavy bombers tear through the thin air, their turbofan engines screaming a high-pitched whine that vibrates through the fuselage. The dark gray paint of the aircraft absorbs the morning light. Immense wings flex slightly under the strain of the payload. Beneath the wings, long-range cruise missiles hang from heavy pylons, their warheads painted with distinct yellow warning bands. The bombers fly in a tight diamond formation, a display of discipline and raw power. Flanking the heavy giants, 6 fighter jets weave through the air. They are sleek, predatory machines. Their afterburners glow with a faint violet hue as they maintain speed with the slower bombers. A pilot in the lead fighter looks left. His visor reflects the endless horizon. He banks the aircraft sharply. The jet responds instantly, rolling over the top of the bomber formation. The maneuver is aggressive. It is a claim of ownership over the sky. 300 miles away, inside a radar station on a rocky island outcrop, a green sweep line rotates rhythmically on a glass screen. The room is dark, illuminated only by the glow of monitors and the flickering LEDs of server banks. A Japanese operator leans forward. The sweep line hits a cluster of contacts. It hits them again. The screen blooms with red hostile markers. The operator jams a finger onto a red button. A klaxon erupts. The sound is a jagged, tearing noise that bounces off the concrete walls. Back in the air, the Chinese formation pushes forward. They cross the invisible line of the air defense identification zone. The lead bomber dips its nose. The formation descends. They punch through the cloud layer. The white mist swallows the aircraft for a split second before they burst out the bottom. Dark shapes against the gray ocean. The air density increases. Vapor trails stream from the wingtips of the escort fighters. The sound of their passage hits the water below, a sonic pressure wave that flattens the waves. The flight commander of the bomber wing toggles a switch. The bomb bay doors of the lead aircraft cycle open for a test. Hydraulics hiss. The mechanical groan vibrates through the airframe. The doors snap shut. It is a rehearsal for devastation. The escort fighters spread out, widening the net. They arm their fire control radars. The electronic signature floods the atmosphere, a loud, invisible shout challenging anyone to intervene. Inside the Japanese command center, the threat board lights up. Officers shout coordinates. Telephones ring incessantly. The track trajectory is clear. The foreign armada is not turning. They are driving a wedge straight toward the sovereign airspace. The peaceful morning is dead. The machinery of defense begins to grind into motion. 08:15 hours, Kadena Air Base, Okinawa. The subtropical heat rises from the black tarmac in shimmering waves. Ground crews move slowly around the hardened aircraft shelters. The air smells of burnt rubber, ozone, and unburnt hydrocarbons. A fuel truck idles near the taxiway, its pump mechanism clanking rhythmically. A mechanic wipes grease from a wrench with a rag. It is a routine Tuesday morning maintenance cycle. The base pulses with a slow, heavy lethargy. The klaxon shatters the humidity. It is a long, undulating wail that triggers an instant paved-in reflex. Scramble, scramble, scramble! The voice on the PA system is distorted, loud, and urgent. The lethargy evaporates. Pilots burst through the doors of the readiness room. They sprint across the scorching concrete. Their G-suits are heavy and cumbersome. Harness buckles clang against their legs. Sweat instantly beads on their foreheads. They do not look at each other. They run toward the open maws of the hangars. Ground crews throw ladders against the fuselages of 8 U.S. fighter jets. The metal clatters against the composite skin. Crew chiefs yank the red, remove before flight streamers from the weapon pylons. They hurl the tags onto the floor. The pilots vault into the cockpits. They jam helmets onto their heads and strap in. Fingers fly across instrument panels, flipping switches. The auxiliary power units whine. The sound builds from a whistle to a deafening scream. The main engines catch. A low, guttural roar shakes the concrete floor of the shelter. Heat blur erupts from the exhaust nozzles. The air behind the jets turns into a violent, distorted ripple. Chocks are pulled away. The pilots signal with a sharp thumbs up. The jets lurch forward. They taxi aggressively, turning hard onto the main runway. Tires bite into the asphalt. The suspension compresses as the aircraft brake and align in pairs. There is no waiting for clearance. The tower flashes a green light gun signal. The lead pilot slams the throttle to the stops. He engages the afterburner. A cone of blue and orange fire erupts from the rear of the jet. The noise is physical. It hammers the chests of the ground crew watching from the grass. The fighter jet accelerates. It tears down the runway. The nose wheel lifts. The main gear leaves the ground. The second jet follows seconds later, riding the turbulent wake of the leader. Then the third, then the fourth. They climb at a steep, impossible angle, tearing through the cloud ceiling. Eagle Flight, check in, the flight lead snaps over the radio. 2, 3, 4. Vector 300, Buster. The formation banks hard to the west. The roar fades from the airfield, leaving only the smell of burnt fuel, and the ringing in the ears of the ground crew. The sky is empty again, but the threat is now engaged. 8:40 hours, high altitude over the East China Sea. The sun hangs high, a blinding white disk against the deep indigo of the upper atmosphere. Inside the cockpits of the U.S. fighter jets, the air conditioning hums, fighting the solar heat baking the bubble canopies. The formation flies in a silent, spread-out wall. The radar displays show a cluster of red triangles closing the gap. The range counter ticks down frantically. 40 miles, 30 miles. The closing speed approaches Mach 2. The U.S. flight lead squints through his visor. He spots a glint of silver against the cloud deck below. The specks grow instantly into distinct shapes. The silhouette of the Chinese bomber wing looms large, flanked by the angular, aggressive shapes of their escort fighters. The radar warning receiver in the U.S. cockpit begins a slow, rhythmic chirp. The enemy radar is sweeping them. Tally-ho, visual on bandits, merging, the lead pilot snaps. The two formations slam into the same airspace. They pass each other with a combined speed of 1,500 miles per hour. The air between the jets compresses and detonates. The shockwave hits the U.S. fighters like a physical hammer. The jets shudder violently. Canopy glass rattles in the frames. The pilots are thrown against their harnesses. The U.S. lead slams the stick to the left. He yanks it back into his gut. The fighter jet rolls 90 degrees and bites into the air. The G-forces hit instantly. An invisible elephant sits on the pilot's chest. His G-suit inflates with a hiss, crushing his legs to force blood back to his brain. He grunts against the pressure, straining his neck to look over his shoulder. Behind him, the Chinese escort fighters execute a mirror maneuver. They bank hard, their engines flaring with heat. They try to slot in behind the U.S. formation. It is a race for position. The sky turns into a swirling tangle of contrails. Engage defensive spread, isolate the bombers, the U.S. lead orders. 2 U.S. fighters break away from the turning fight. They dive. They trade altitude for raw speed. They scream underneath the dogfight, aiming directly for the heavy bombers. The bombers plow forward, maintaining their course toward the islands. The U.S. jets pull up directly in front of the lead bomber's nose. They trigger their afterburners. Huge plumes of superheated exhaust and turbulent air blast directly into the face of the Chinese bomber. The massive aircraft hits the jet wash. It is like hitting a concrete wall. The bomber lurches violently upward, the wings flex terrifyingly. The pilot fights the yoke, overcorrecting. The bomber banks hard to the right, sliding out of position. The tight, disciplined diamond formation shatters. The other bombers scatter, banking away to avoid a mid-air collision. The wall of heavy armor is broken. 850 hours above the East China Sea. The scattered bomber formation struggles to regain stability. Turbines whine as the heavy aircraft level out, their wings flexing against the turbulence. The sky is a chaotic canvas of dissipating contrails and shimmering heat haze. Sunlight glints off the canopy of a U.S. fighter holding a steady intercept course. The radio channels are clogged with static and terse commands. The air smells of ozone and burnt kerosene inside the pressurized cockpits. A Chinese escort fighter banks sharply. It abandons its defensive posture near the bombers. The nose of the enemy jet swings around, pointing directly at the lead U.S. aircraft. The separation distance collapses. The Chinese pilot accelerates. He drives his jet straight at the U.S. flight leader in a game of aerial chicken. At the last second, the enemy jet pulls up vertical. The belly of the aircraft exposes itself, shoots open. Magnesium flares erupt from the fuselage. The flares burn at 2,000 degrees. They create a blinding wall of fire and smoke right in the path of the U.S. jet. The American pilot flies straight into the debris field. A flare strikes the polycarbonate canopy. It explodes on impact. A scorch mark scars the glass directly in the pilot's line of sight. The sensor suite momentarily blinds, overwhelmed by the thermal spike. Simultaneously, a second Chinese fighter slashes across the flight path from above. He cuts dangerously close. The wingtips pass within 10 feet of each other. The air pressure between the two metal beasts drops instantly. The vacuum pulls the jets together like magnets. The U.S. pilot slams the control stick to the right. The The jet rolls violently to avoid a mid-air collision. The airframe groans under the sudden torque. Bolts rattle. The fighter shudders as it washes out of the lift, dropping 500 feet in seconds. Warning lights flash amber on the dashboard. The aggressive maneuver forces the U.S. formation to scatter. Break right, they are boxing us in!" the U.S. wingman screams over the radio. The U.S. fighters split. They abandon the intercept line. The Chinese fighters seize the momentum. They loop over the top, occupying the high ground. They now look down on the scattered American jets, their noses pointing toward the ocean, ready to dive. 0900 hours, Combat Air Patrol Box, East China Sea. The chaotic swirl of the merge settles into a grim, linear pursuit. Sunlight glares off the white missiles strapped to the wingtips. The roar of engines is constant, a background static to the heavy breathing of pilots in their masks. The ocean below is a blue blur, ignored. Inside the cockpits, the digital displays are clutter-free, focusing on singular targets. The Chinese fighters level their wings behind the Americans. They stop maneuvering for position. They align their noses directly with the exhaust plumes of the U.S. jets. It is a posture of execution. The cockpit audio changes instantly. The low-priority sweeping chirp vanishes. A high-pitched, solid, continuous tone screams into the headsets of the U.S. pilots. It is the digital scream of a hard lock. On the glass heads-up display, a red box snaps around the trailing Chinese aircraft. The word lock flashes in angry red letters. The threat warning system panel lights up. The Chinese fire control radars burn through the ambient interference. They are painting the U.S. jets with a narrow, focused beam of energy, guiding missiles that are still on the rails. The U.S. flight lead reacts on instinct. His gloved hand moves to the main weapon control panel. He flips a plastic safety cover up. He toggles the switch underneath. The master arm light glows green. "Spiked! We are spiked at 6 o'clock!" a wingman yells. The voice cracks with strain. "Music on! Defend!" the lead orders. The U.S. jets release countermeasures. Cartridges fire from the fuselage. Clouds of aluminum-coated glass fibers, chaff, explode behind the jets. The silver clouds bloom in the air, creating false radar echoes. The U.S. pilots stomp on their rudder pedals. The jets skid sideways, trying to break the invisible radar beam dragging behind them. The continuous tone wavers for a split second, then returns. It is steady, it is louder. The lock holds. The electronic threshold of peace dissolves. The engagement logic shifts from interception to survival. 0905 hours, the breaking point. The stalemate collapses. A spark ignites on the port wing of a Chinese fighter. The solid rocket motor fires. A white plume of smoke slashes across the blue sky. The missile tears off the launch rail. It accelerates instantly to Mach 3. "Missile launch, 9 o'clock!" The U.S. wingman slams his throttle forward. He banks hard into the threat. The missile tracks him. Its seeker head hunts the heat of his engines. The pilot punches the countermeasure button. Thump, thump, thump. Magnesium flares shoot from the American jet. They burn blindingly hot, creating a chain of false suns behind the aircraft. The missile takes the bait. It veers sharply. It flies directly into the center of a burning flare. Detonation. The warhead explodes. A sphere of fire and shrapnel erupts in midair. The shockwave ripples outward. It slams into the U.S. fighter jet. The aircraft shudders violently. Metal groans. The pilot's head snaps against the cockpit glass. Shrapnel peppers the vertical stabilizer, tearing small, jagged holes in the composite skin. Smoke trails from the explosion cloud the canopy. "Engage! Weapons free! Weapons free!" the flight lead roars. The rules of engagement evaporate. The U.S. flight lead selects a target. He squeezes the trigger on his flight stick. A Sidewinder missile roars off his rail. The smoke trail connects the two aircraft in a deadly line. The Chinese fighter dives, rolling inverted to escape. The sky fills with crisscrossing smoke trails, burning magnesium and the screams of straining engines. The Cold War turns hot. 0910 hours, the kill box. The linear chase dissolves into a swirling, three-dimensional knife fight. The sky is a tangled knot of exhaust trails and falling debris. There is no up or down. There is only the enemy and the airspeed indicator. The jets pass each other at point-blank range, close enough to see the helmet markings of the opposing pilots. A U.S. fighter pulls into a steep vertical climb. The afterburner glows white-hot. The jet stands on its tail, fighting gravity. The Chinese pursuer follows, nose locked on the American's exhaust. They climb until the air gets too thin to grip. The speed bleeds off. Both jets hang suspended in the air, stalling, heavy and sluggish. The American pilot stomps the left rudder pedal. He chops the throttle. The U.S. jet pivots on a dime. The nose slices downward, executing a hammerhead stall turn. Gravity grabs the nose. The fighter falls backward, sliding neatly behind the stalled Chinese jet. The hunter becomes the prey. Guns, guns, guns. The American pilot squeezes the trigger. The 20mm rotary cannon in the nose spins up. The sound is a low, guttural buzzsaw vibration that shakes the entire airframe. A stream of yellow tracer rounds erupts from the muzzle. The shells shear through the air. They smash into the right wing of the Chinese fighter. Aluminum skin shreds, hydraulic lines sever. A mist of high-octane fuel sprays into the slipstream. A spark ignites the vapor. A long tongue of orange fire trails the enemy jet. The aircraft shudders and enters a flat spin. It spirals down toward the ocean like a burning leaf. The canopy blows off with a bang. The ejection seat rocket fires, punching the enemy pilot out of the doomed cockpit. "Bandit Splash 1, the U.S. pilot gasps. His breathing is heavy, labored rasps over the comms. But the fight is not over. 2 more Chinese fighters dive on the isolated American wingman. They pinch him from both sides. Green tracer rounds zip past his canopy glass. The U.S. pilot yanks the stick back and right. The jet shudders under the G-load. He dives for the deck, screaming toward the whitecaps to shake the pursuit. 09:20 hours, surface of the East China Sea. The steel bow of the U.S. destroyer cuts through a heavy swell. White water crashes over the forward gun turret. The ship rolls slowly in the trough of the waves. Inside the Combat Information Center, the room is bathed in the eerie blue glow of radar screens. The air conditioner hums loudly, keeping the massive server banks cool. Officers stand behind the seated operators, gripping the backs of chairs as the deck tilts. "Tracks designate hostile. Vampires inbound on friendly air," the tactical action officer shouts. His voice cuts through the low murmur of the room. The captain stands in the center. He looks at the large display on the bulkhead. The red symbols of the Chinese fighters swarm the blue symbols of the American jets. The geometry is bad. The pilots are outnumbered. "Batteries release. Clear the sky," the captain orders. On the forward deck, armored hatches flip open with a metallic clang. The vertical launching system activates. Whoosh! A massive column of fire erupts from the deck. An interceptor missile shoots straight up out of the silo. It clears the ship in a fraction of a second. The rocket motor roars, a deafening thunder that shakes the steel hull plates. Smoke washes over the bridge windows. A second missile follows, then a third. The missiles tip over. They accelerate to Mach 3, turning the gray sky into a canvas of white smoke trails. They hunt the heat of the Chinese engines above. High overhead, the Chinese pilots get the warning. Their radar receivers scream. The hunters become the hunted. They abandon their pursuit of the U.S. wingmen. They break hard to the north, dumping flares and diving toward the wave tops to hide in the ground clutter. The defensive umbrella of the destroyer forces the enemy back. The pressure on the U.S. jets vanishes instantly. 9:30 hours, the invisible battlefield. The physical exchange of missiles pauses. The surviving Chinese fighters regroup in the distance, small specks against the towering cloud walls. But the air is not empty. A large, humpbacked aircraft maneuvers behind the Chinese formation. It is an electronic warfare plane. It does not carry missiles. It carries massive generator pods under its wings. The pods activate. Directed energy floods the electromagnetic spectrum. It hits the U.S. formation like a tidal wave. Inside the American cockpits, the world dissolves into static. The tactical map on the multifunction display flickers. The clean blue symbols of friendly aircraft vanish. They are replaced by a chaotic storm of false contacts. Ghost targets multiply across the screen. The radar sweep line stutters and freezes. "Check fire! Check fix!" The radio channel dies. A high-pitched digital shriek blasts through the headsets. It is deafening. The pilots rip the connectors from their helmets to stop the noise. The silence that follows is heavy and isolating. The complex data link network, the invisible web that connects the ships to the jets, shreds instantly. The U.S. flight lead looks down. His sensors are blind. The sophisticated computer brain of the jet is lobotomized by the overwhelming noise jamming. He is effectively flying a multi-million-dollar jet from the 1950s. He looks left. He finds his wingman visually. He taps the side of his helmet repeatedly. The universal signal for comms down. He rocks his wings violently. Left, right, left. The wingman responds. He tucks his jet in tight, bringing his wingtip within feet of the lead's cockpit. They abandon the spread formation. They tighten the pack. Without radar to see threats, eyes must scan every quadrant of the sky. Necks crane, heads swivel constantly. They fly on raw instinct and geometry, trusting the man next to them, not the machine. 9:45 hours. The disengagement line. The electronic screeching fades. The static clears. The radios crackle back to life with the reassuring hiss of open channels. The jamming aircraft has turned back. Its pods are silent. The Chinese fighters bank slowly to the west. Their movements are sluggish. The aggressive sharp turns are gone. They fly level, conserving every drop of kerosene. They have reached bingo fuel, the mathematical limit of their endurance. One Chinese fighter trails a thin gray ribbon of smoke. Its right engine is shut down, the nozzle cold and dark. The pilot fights the asymmetry with his rudder, keeping the wounded bird in the air. The formation huddles around him, a protective wedge of steel. They are breaking off, heading 270, the U.S. lead confirms. His voice is flat, drained of adrenaline. The U.S. jets slide into position behind them. They do not lock their radars. They do not arm their weapons. They simply watch. They act as sheepdogs, herding the intruders back to the fence. The two formations fly in tandem for 50 miles. The ocean below rolls on, indifferent to the violence above. At the edge of the air defense identification zone, the Chinese lead dips his wing. It is a small, rigid gesture, a professional acknowledgement. Then they accelerate slightly, crossing back into international airspace. They shrink into small dark dots against the western horizon. The U.S. flight lead exhales long and hard. He reaches up and unclips his oxygen mask. It hangs loose on one side, revealing a face masked in sweat and deep red indentations from the rubber seal. He rolls his neck. The vertebrae pop audibly. He looks at his fuel gauge. The needle hovers near the red zone. All players, status green, RTB, let's go home, he says. The American jets bank east. The sun is behind them now. The sky is empty. The silence returns.